My name is Lex Lasry. I'm a judge of the Supreme Court of Victoria. I was at Haileybury between 1960 and 1966. It was a totally different era. I mean, this was an era of pretty harsh discipline, including corporal punishment, and we all copped it for what seemed to me to be extraordinarily trivial offences. I was caned for not having cuffs on my casual trousers. I mean, it was just a different era. That was ridiculous, but that's the way the rules were. And perhaps that was the beginning of a sense of injustice, I don't know. The thing that captivated me about the law for the first time was when I first stepped into a courtroom. Once that had happened, I knew that I wanted to have something to do with that. I didn't know quite how it was going to work, but there was something about the atmosphere, the contest, the performance of being in a courtroom that totally captivated me, and that's really where it started. In the early 1980s, one of the projects I had was as a barrister in the Costigan Royal Commission, which was an inquiry set up by the Fraser government indeed, to inquire into the Federated Ship Painters and Dockers Union, which was both a state union and a federal union. And I joined that commission as junior counsel assisting. The great thing that Frank Costigan did was, particularly dealing with the Federated Ship Painters and Dockers Union, was to expose massive fraud and significant crime. There were ships painters and dockers who worked on ships, but not many of them lived in Melbourne. So yes, I look back on it with pride. I learned a lot of things. I think one of the things I learned was forensic judgment during that time, because we, particularly towards the end, we took on some projects that probably we shouldn't have taken on because we didn't have time and perhaps not on enough evidence. But most of the time, that Royal Commission, I think, laid a really good plan for the way crime could be investigated, the way the money trail could be pursued, and I was, to a small degree, part of that. I was the Law Council's independent observer, the trial of David Hicks, between basically 2004 and 2007, so I went to Guantanamo twice. He was being dealt with by the military commissions set up by the Bush government, or the Bush White House at Guantanamo Bay, charged with offences in relation to his time in Afghanistan. He was collected during Operation Enduring Freedom at the end of 2001 after the attacks on the Twin Towers. So my job was to go along as an Australian representative to basically watch what happened and report on it, which is what I did. In 2007, Hicks pleaded guilty to an offence which was a completely contrived offence, was sentenced and then sent back to Australia and served most of his sentence in prison in Adelaide, and has now effectively been exonerated. These people were at Guantanamo Bay because the US government did not want them to have the rights that US citizens would have. So no US citizens were ever kept there. These were all foreigners, mainly from the Middle East, but one or two Australians. It was a system designed to produce a particular result, which was verdicts of guilty and, for a time, the imposition of the death penalty. My position on the death penalty really started at university. The first case that I was asked as a student to read in criminal law by the great Professor Louis Waller was the Queen against Ryan and Walker, and that was the case concerning the escape from Pentridge by Ronald Ryan and Peter Walker, which resulted in the killing of a warder from Pentridge called George Hodson. Ronald Ryan was executed in, I think, February 1967. There was a massive campaign led against his execution by, most notably, Barry Jones, later Federal Member of Parliament, significant politician. And that campaign convinced me that the death penalty was not the answer, and that was the feeling in Australia at the time. And that was it, I thought. And then Van Nguyen's mother contacted Julian McMahon, who in turn contacted me. He was in Singapore. He'd been arrested for drugs in 2002, and so we began a saga that ended with his hanging in 2005. And while that case was running, I was approached by Chintu Sukumaran, who was Myron's younger brother, to also get involved for them. We did, and Julian carried on that case after I went to the court. My opinion is that if a government decides that someone is to be legally murdered, then the community that government represents is reducing itself to the level of the criminal. The way we test how civilised we are is to look at how we treat our worst. It's easy to love the best, it's easy to love the most sympathetic, but we really measure our civilisation by how we treat our worst. And the worst thing we can do for our civilisation is for governments to kill people. Almost all my cases are homicide cases as a judge. So every time I walk into a courtroom, it's going to be about a case where someone's been killed and perhaps murdered. Some of the killings of people can be quite brutal. There are cases that I would avoid if I could, but nothing compares with the killing of children. There's some notorious examples that I can mention. And I presided over the retrial of Robert Farquharson for the murder of his 3 children in the dam at Winchelsea. I found that a very difficult case. Any judge would. They'd be kidding themselves if they said that they didn't struggle with it. It is emotionally draining being a lawyer and being a criminal lawyer in particular. The thing you have to learn as an advocate, particularly in criminal law, but probably in all cases, is to disengage from the emotional aspect of the case. If you're involved in the emotions that they're feeling, then your judgment's going to be just as clouded as theirs is. It's not the barrister's job to love the client. The barrister's job is to do the best job they can for that client. I started playing the drums badly in the 1960s, and there's a good Haileybury reason for that. First of all, in the 1960s I was a teenager, 15 or 16 years of age. The Beatles and the Rolling Stones had just launched themselves. It was huge. It wasn't me that came up with the name the Lex Pistols. I think, I can't now remember who it is. I've tried to change it a few times. I thought it was probably not appropriate for a judge hearing murder trials to be in a band called the Lex Pistols. There's something about the word pistol that put me off. But people liked it, so it stuck. The band plays probably 3 or 4 or 5 times a year. We've done some reasonably serious performances, though not at a professional level. But a couple of years ago, we set up a concert for Peter Grester. You will recall the journalist who was detained in Egypt, to raise money for him, and the real purpose was to get significant musicians along, the hi-fi bar in the city. So Ross was there, the Rock Whiz band were there, Mark Seymour was there, Ella Hooper, a few others like that. Great players and great musicians and great performers, and we opened the show. That was the biggest thrill that we've had in our existence. Once retired, I'm really genuinely not sure what I'll do. I think I'll pursue a few of the interests that we've talked about. Death penalty, I'll be interested in musical things. But I'm going to take it easy. I've been working pretty hard since I realised that the law was about working hard, whenever that was, and I'm looking forward to not having that commitment. That's probably the main thing that I'm looking forward to. There might even be something I can do at Haileybury that will help someone, I don't know. That's the plan anyway.